The PlayStation 3 is a strange console to look back on, especially when it comes to JRPGs. It followed the golden era of the PlayStation 2, a system so rich in genre defining titles that the PS3 was almost destined to feel like a transitional step of sorts, and in many ways it was. Budgets kind of shifted, franchises struggled to adapt to HD development cycles, among many other hurdles that development teams had to jump through. But what the PS3 lacked in sheer volume, it made up for in boldness and experimentation. This was an era full of experimentation, revision, and reinvention. Not every game hit the mark, but many of them tried things that still feel refreshing today. They pushed the genre forward, in my opinion, and deserve recognition for doing so. Today, I'm giving you my top 10 JRPGs on the PlayStation 3 that really stood out, not only for their quality, but for their commitment to unique gameplay systems and storytelling. So, with all that said, let's jump right into the list. When Eternal Sonata launched, it was met with some confusion and curiosity, and perhaps rightfully so. A JRPG based on the final hours of a famous composer sounds like a gimmick of sorts, and yet Eternal Sonata is one of the most thematically cohesive JRPGs of this generation. The entire game takes place within Chopin's dream as he lies on his deathbed, and the way it weaves real historical information into a whimsical fantasy narrative is insanely impressive. Mechanically, Eternal Sonata strikes a balance between action and strategy. Its combat is turn-based but time-sensitive, and it incorporates light and shadow mechanics that affect how abilities behave depending on your positioning. This elevates otherwise straightforward battles into dynamic, placement-driven engagements. Character progression is also paced well, and the game systems remain consistently engaging without feeling too overwhelming. What really sets this game apart, though, is its presentation. It has these cel-shaded visuals that hold up remarkably well with a storybook aesthetic that gives the world a more painterly quality. The soundtrack appropriately feels very classical, with original compositions paired alongside Chopin's own works. This contextualizes his music in a deeply emotional way. The result is a rare fusion of gameplay and artistic expression that doesn't just respect its subject matter, it builds a fantasy world around it that's stuck in my memory even to this day as something super unique. Despite its polish, Eternal Sonata flew under the radar. Some dismissed it as too odd or too narratively indulgent, but taken on its own terms, it's one of the PS3's most unique offerings. A game that rethinks what a JRPG can explore, not in terms of scale, but in terms of creativity. It's stunning, and it never overstays its welcome. I love this game, so if you haven't played it, definitely be sure to check it out. There's no other game out there quite like Resonance of Fate. Developed by Tri-Ace, this game approaches storytelling and combat from entirely non-traditional perspectives. While most JRPGs ease players into their systems, Resonance of Fate throws you into the deep end, a choice that led to mixed reception at launch, but also made it a cult classic amongst those who gave it time to unfold. The battle system is a hybrid of turn-based and real-time action built around a system called Tri-Attack, and its signature mechanic, the hero action, is a lot to unpack. You dive, spin, and shoot in slow motion, coordinating movement around a triangular formation that builds up resonance points. When executed well, the choreography feels like directing an action movie with bullets flying and enemies being juggled mid-air. It's incredibly satisfying, especially once it clicks with you. Narratively, the game is minimalistic, but quietly profound in my opinion. Set in a dystopian vertical city suspended above a polluted Earth, Resonance of Fate tells a small story against the backdrop of a dying world. The three leads are really well written and present with unique situations and storylines that really help flesh out the overall game. The game doesn't spell things out for you in obvious ways either, and much of its emotional power comes from subtle character moments and more atmospheric world building. It's not a game that holds your hand in any way, shape, or form, and at times that can be super frustrating, but for those willing to engage with its layered systems and more unorthodox structure, Resonance of Fate offers one of the most distinct experiences of the PS3 generation. It's mechanical first, but within those mechanics lies a design philosophy that values mastery, experimentation, and real style in its combat. Definitely check this one out if you haven't had a chance to yet. When Valkyria Chronicles arrived on the PS3 in 2008, it didn't make much of a splash commercially. but critically and creatively, it stood apart from the rest, not just as a tactical JRPG, but as a redefinition of what strategy and storytelling could look like on a console. The first thing that stands out is its visual style. Using a proprietary engine, Valkyria Chronicles blends cel-shaded animation with watercolor textures, creating a hand-drawn aesthetic that remains distinctive even today. And this painterly presentation isn't just surface level. It gives the game a storybook tone that mixes really well with the grim subject matter. Mechanically, it's a hybrid of tactical turn-based strategy and third-person action. You select units from a top-down map, then control them directly in real time to maneuver, aim, and fire. A system dubbed Blitz, the fusion of planning and execution, makes every encounter tense and more personal. You're not just issuing orders, you're dodging sniper fire, lining up shots, and racing to revive fallen allies. Each unit is a character with their own personalities and traits that influence performance, making every death more than just a lost piece on the board, for example. Narratively, the game situates itself in a fictional continent reminiscent of World War II Europe. You play as Squad 7, a civilian militia from a neutral country caught in a continent-wide conflict. What starts as a relatively small-scale war story gradually reveals more and unfolds into a much larger-scale adventure. Valkyria Chronicles didn't follow a lot of the genre trends at the time. It created its own lane, and while its successor varied in quality, the original remains a rare combination of art direction, tactical depth, and emotional storytelling. This game is truly amazing. Few games have had to fight as hard for redemption as Final Fantasy XIII-2. This whole trilogy is met with criticism, but 13-2 is easily my favorite of the three and honestly stands out as one of my favorite games of this entire generation. Released 2 years after Final Fantasy XIII, this sequel sets out to address nearly every criticism leveled at its predecessor. The result is a rare case where a direct sequel doesn't just expand on its foundation, but actively rethinks and improves on it. Where 13 was criticized for its linearity, 13-2 embraces a more non-linear structure. The game introduces a time travel mechanic that allows you to explore alternate timelines, branching outcomes. It's an elegant way to build player agency into a world previously accused of being more on rails. Each time gate feels like a new puzzle box, full of secrets, quests, and variations on the same environment or scenario. It's a clever mechanic that adds both gameplay and variety to the narrative. Combat, once again, based on the paradigm shift system, one of my favorite progression systems in the series. It's faster and more customizable than ever before. This time, you're working with a two-person party in a rotating third slot filled by captured monsters, each serving different combat roles. It adds a kind of Pokemon-light dimension to battles, encouraging experimentation with different team compositions. Narratively, 13-2 leans hard into the more metaphysical JRPG territory with time paradoxes, dying gods, alternate realities. It's definitely messy at times, sure, but also ambitious in a way that feels spiritually closer to games like Chrono Trigger than its direct predecessor. It's not flawless, but Final Fantasy XIII-2 represents something rare, a major franchise listening, adapting, and taking more risks. On PS3, it stands as one of Square Enix's most fascinating course corrections and one of my all-time favorite games. The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel didn't launch with a massive marketing push or explosive sales numbers. Instead, it carved its place quietly, the kind of slow burn success that builds through word of mouth. This is actually how I discovered the series. So many people were talking about it, and I jumped in without playing any of the other games. I soon recognized the insane world building and callbacks to older games and knew I needed to go play the originals first. For players who connected with this one, Cold Steel wasn't just another JRPG. It was a dense, character-driven game that redefined how serialized storytelling could work within the genre. You play as a new recruit in a military academy's elite group drawn from both noble and commoner backgrounds. What starts as a school year narrative with daily life, bonding events, more mock battles, gradually expands into a sprawling exploration of class conflict and complete civil unrest. Mechanically, the game blends traditional turn-based combat with a modern link system that rewards synergy between characters. The game's depth comes not from raw numbers, but from understanding how characters complement each other on the battlefield. There's also a strong persona-like social system free days are spent deepening bonds, which feed directly back into combat via link abilities and enhanced stats. What makes Cold Steel stand out is its pacing. It's not in a hurry. It takes its time building relationships, setting up world building details, and planting long form story threads that pay off not just in the sequel, but across the entire Trails saga. This is the theme of Trails. This is what everyone loves about it so much, and personally why I connected with it so closely. That level of narrative continuity is rare, even among Western games, and almost unheard of in JRPGs. This whole series should be experienced by any fan of the genre, but I'd start at the beginning, and this year the remake for Trails in the Sky is the perfect opportunity to do so. Level five's Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch is the kind of game that evokes immediate comparisons to animated classics, and for good reason. With its art direction overseen by Studio Ghibli and its score composed by longtime Ghibli collaborator, it wears its inspirations proudly. But beneath the surface lies a traditional JRPG that's deeply committed to the genre's roots. You play as Oliver, a young boy grieving the death of his mother, who finds himself transported to a parallel fantasy world. What begins as a whimsical fish out of water type story gradually morphs into something more emotionally resonant. It's a coming of age tale that keeps its tone quite light, but not without occasional weight. The combat system combines real time movement with command based inputs. You can swap between Oliver, his companions, and their familiars, monsters that can be captured, trained, and evolved. It's a blend of Pokemon style party management and classic RPG resource juggling, for lack of a better way of describing it. Ni no Kuni excels in world design and atmosphere. Towns feel lively, dungeons are creatively themed, and side quests often build on the central emotional themes. The use of a physical wizard's companion book in the original release added to the tactile wonder of the whole experience, something lost in the later, digital re-releases, I think. On PS3, Ni no Kuni stood out not because it innovated, but because it embraced sincerity. In an era of edgy reboots and more, genre mashups, it was unafraid to be warm, more slow-paced, and kind of earnest. And that made this game so memorable to me. This generation didn't have the biggest selection of JRPGs, and this one right here reminded me why I fell in love with the genre in the first place. By the time Tales of Exilia arrived in the West, the Tales franchise had long held a loyal niche following, but never quite broke into the mainstream JRPG conversation. Exilia didn't change that overnight, but it did mark a shift of sorts. With an updated engine, dual protagonists, and a slightly more grounded tone, it positioned itself as a modernized entry point into the series. The game lets you choose between a young medical student or the embodiment of a spirit deity in more human form. This dual protagonist structure isn't just a gimmick, it affects the framing of the entire narrative. While the core story remains the same, key scenes and perspectives shift based on your choices. It encourages multiple playthroughs and offers deeper insight into the character's motivations. Combat is a refined evolution of the linear motion battle system. It's fast-paced, responsive, and rewards aggressive play. The linking mechanic, where two characters pair up for combined attacks and shared skills, adds another layer of strategy and visual flair to the whole game. It's one of the more fluid and engaging real-time combat systems in any JRPG, especially of the PS3 era. Narratively, Exilia moves away from the high fantasy tone of earlier entries and dives into more political and ethical conflicts. The relationship between science and magic, or more specifically, spirit arts and technological development, drives the tension between nations. These aren't just background themes either, they directly influence character motivations, and that directly reflects on the world building. While its environments can feel sparse at times, Tales of Exilia makes up for it with strong pacing, excellent battle design, and a cast that grows more likable as the game unfolds. Star Ocean: The Last Hope International is a game that thrives on ambition, sometimes to its detriment, but more often than not, to its advantage in my opinion. Originally on an Xbox 360 and exclusive to that system, its PS3 re-release brought the definitive version to fans with improved textures, better audio, and a more streamlined interface. Set after World War III but before the events of the earlier Star Ocean games, The Last Hope explores humanity's first foray into space exploration. You play as Edge Maverick, a Federation officer tasked with finding a new home for a post-apocalyptic Earth. What follows is a planetary hopping sci-fi epic that mixes traditional fantasy elements with really high science fiction concepts. Combat is real time and more action oriented, evolving the mechanics of Star Ocean till the end of time with smoother execution and more flexible party dynamics. You can freely switch between characters mid battle, stringing together combos, dodging with precision timing, and exploiting enemy weaknesses in real time. It's fast, it's responsive, and rewards skillful play. Where The Last Hope draws criticism is often in tone and character writing. Some dialogue is clunky, and not all character arcs land as intended. But those willing to look past its somewhat awkward delivery will find a surprisingly great story here. On the PS3, Star Ocean: The Last Hope is arguably the most complete Star Ocean experience to date. Ambitious, sprawling, and sometimes completely weird and off the wall, I love everything that it offers. The original Nier on PlayStation 3 is a paradox of sorts. It's rough around the edges, it's technically dated, it's visually muddy, and occasionally it's clunky in its mechanics, and yet it has endured and even flourished because of what lies underneath. A narrative with unparalleled emotional weight, a hauntingly beautiful soundtrack, and a creative vision unafraid to break every rule in the book. You play as a father searching for a cure for his daughter afflicted by a mysterious disease known as the Black Scrawl. What begins as a straightforward action RPG slowly reveals itself to be something much deeper. The game's greatest strength is its willingness to confront the player with moral ambiguity and emotional consequence, often when you least expect it. Gameplay wise, Nier mixes hack and slash combat with magic, light RPG customization, and a lot of side quests. While the mechanics are serviceable, they aren't the draw here. What elevates the game are its bold narrative experiments, a text adventure dungeon, a top-down bullet hell homage, shifting genre perspectives constantly. These aren't gimmicks, they reflect character memory and theme. Nier on the PS3 was a critical underdog, but one of my standout favorites. Its flaws are there, but my experience with it was so unexpectedly great that I overlooked almost all of them. It remains one of the most emotionally charged RPGs I've ever played, and if you want to go back and play the original, or just go play Nier Replicant on modern consoles, definitely dive into this game. Released early in the PS3's life cycle, Folklore is one of the system's most overlooked gems. A game that blends action RPG mechanics, a mystery kind of horror atmosphere, and a deep dive into more Celtic mythology. Developed by Game Republic and published by Sony, it didn't receive much marketing support, but it has since developed a quiet following amongst players who value something truly different. The story is told through two protagonists, Ellen, a young woman investigating her mother's mysterious death, and a journalist drawn into a world beyond the veil. Both characters are connected to the Netherworld, a dreamlike realm populated by folk, supernatural creatures based on folklore and myth. The game is structured around murder mysteries that unfold in both the real world and the spiritual one, with each realm revealing different facets of the story. Combat revolves around capturing and deploying them, each with unique abilities suited to specific enemies and tactics. Using the PS3's controller at the time, you physically could yank the spirits out of weakened foes, a novelty that, on the PS3, surprisingly added tension and rhythm to the flow of everything. The system encourages experimentation, especially as you unlock new folk and customize your whole loadout. What sets Folklore apart, though, is its atmosphere. The art direction, blending Victorian ghost story with dreamlike fantasy, is rich with mood and texture, and the soundtrack and environmental design create a game world that feels very intimate. In many ways, Folklore is this quintessential lost classic, a game that didn't chase trends but instead carved out its own identity. On PS3, where experimental titles often went unnoticed, Folklore remains a standout game that I personally think everyone should at least give a try. The PS3 never got its Final Fantasy X. It didn't deliver a universal masterpiece that defined its generation, but maybe that's what makes its JRPG lineup so interesting. It wasn't about one towering giant, it was about the games that experimented. The ones that almost worked perfectly. The ones that left a deeper mark, not just because they were flawless, but because they had a vision. So whether you're revisiting these titles or discovering them for the first time, this list is a reminder of what made the PS3 quietly great for JRPG fans. It's not the console that saved the genre. In fact, this was a period of time that I think the genre was in a bit of a rut. But there are some truly great games here that I think any fan would enjoy. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite PS3 JRPGs are. Were there any that I missed here that you would have liked to see on this list? I look forward to reading your thoughts. Until next time, I'm out.